Children, good morning, all of you. In history, chapter 10, changes in arts, is going on. And here, so far, we have studied up to the Bengal School of Art. Besides, we have studied the Imperial Art, the Colonial Art. The Colonial Art, what showed the Indian culture as the inferior one, and there, in that particular art, those painters created an illusion of depth by making distant objects smaller and also change the shape of the object, giving them a three-dimensional effect. They started using oil paints. Oil they started using as a medium of painting. The development of the imperial art, many painters or artists who came from abroad, they started looking for their career in the field of art. They often visited the company officials or the Indian rulers' courts. They made their portraits, and now at this time the miniature painting, what was in use or in trend in the Mughal era or the medieval period, that replaced by the portrait paintings. The portrait painters painted the, painted the company officials, the Indian rulers. Nawab Muhammad Ali Khan of our court had got his portrait painted by Tilly Kettle, a famous artist. Though at the time when he got himself portraited, he was pensioned off, but he liked to be showing himself as the ruler, as the royal one. The same, there were many people, many Indian rulers who liked that. The Governor General and the officials like the British residents presented portraits of themselves and often received images of Prince in return. Historical events, historical paintings. The historical paintings were the portraits of the achievements of the company when like the Battle of Plassey, Buxar, and so on, the defeat of Tipu Sultan, the Treaty of Allahabad being signed, are examples of such historical paintings. Then came a time when the picturesque paintings were also entered in use. Many painters arrived with the intention of specializing in the field of picturesque or landscape painting. Picturesque painting, the landscape painting in which the human figure were often identical. They were often the natural scene, natural beauty. They wanted to capture the pictorial and the exotic aspects of India, besides recording the variety in the Indian way of life. Two Daniels, Thomas and William Daniel, who arrived in India to explore the exotic and the picturesque country. The Victoria Memorial is having the largest collection of the works of the two Daniels. However, most of the paintings portrait ruins of buildings what were of grandeur, what were used to be very grand at some time, but later they ruined because of many reasons, like the rulers lost their territories, the territories came under the control of the British people, British officials, or the company officials. And there was the time when the company school also came into existence. During the rule of the East India Company, a new kind of painting popularly known as the company school made its appearance in India. The official of the company were interested in painting that would capture the pictorial and the exotic aspects of India, of Indian way of life, variety in the Indian way of life. The Indian artist of this school adapted the Western style of painting, the style according to the British taste. They produced paintings of flora and fauna, landscape, historical monuments, darbar scenes, images of native rulers, trades and occupations, festivals, ceremonies, dance, music, etc. And they changed their medium and now began to paint with watercolors and also use pencil sketch. Paintings were done on paper. Company paintings were first produced in the Madras Presidency in South India. This soon spread to the other parts of the country such as Calcutta, Lucknow, Agra, Delhi, Punjab and Western India. The same. There was the Kalighat paintings, the Kalighat school, the scroll painters who used to illustrate their paintings over clothes or over patas. They used to be sitting outside the Kalighat, outside the temple at Kalighat. These paintings were on patas or on clothes, and that is responsible for giving them the name like the Kalighat painters, or they were often called patuas. These paintings were done on patas or on clothes and depicted images of gods and goddesses and scenes from the Indian mythology. Later, there came a change in the style. Now, they started using the manufactured papers instead of the handmade paper and illustrating the images that could be having only one or two figures that could be painted quickly with simple forms, leaving the background plain and eliminating non-essential details. Instead of cloth or handmade paper, they used manufactured papers. The development of national art towards the early years of the 20th century, there was an upsurge nationalist feelings. Paintings were made in modern style and often depicted the nationalist sentiments. Raja Ravi Verma was one of the pioneers of this art. Raja Ravi Verma from Travancore, Kerala, was one of the most famous artists of this time. His talents took him to Europe and where he learned to paint in oil And later, he made fascinating paintings of gods and goddesses. He reintroduced Indian mythology in his artwork. He was invited to different parts of India where he went and he painted the portraits and the scenes from Indian mythology. But later, when the nationalist sentiments began to spread, Raja Ravi Verma and his style were often protested by the people. Why? Because that was having the impacts of Western culture, Western art. When the Swadeshi movement was going on here in India, his artwork was protested by the Indian artists. It is especially seen in the Bengal School of Art. The Bengal School of Art was founded by Arbindonath Tagore. He was in favor of Indian traditional and local techniques of painting. Thus, he rejected the Western style, Western artistic style. Tagore and his sister Nivedita led the artist to move away from oil paintings and themes that were popular with both the British and the Indians. They criticized the styles of Raja Ravi Verma as being westernized in its impression. Now we should start a new topic, that is the colonial press. Children, after that form of art, painting and drawing, sketching, there came new forms. The colonial press came into being. Many paintings, many printing presses came up with short printing image printings or printed images of gods and goddesses and even famous Bengali personalities. One of the earliest was the Calcutta Art Studio. These pictures were realistic and set in landscapes. These were printed on posters and even calendars. A very popular print was of the painting of Bharat Mata by Rabindranath Tagore. By Abindranath, Abindranath Tagore, it became an icon to inspire the nationalist feelings among Indians. The Indian people, the Indian freedom fighters or the nationalist people, while they were holding any demonstration, any march movement or any other kind of political event, they used this image and it became an icon of independence. It became an icon to inspire the nationalist feelings among the Indians. He portrayed Bharat Mata as four-armed Hindu goddess, like the other Hindu goddesses are there. There in the mythology, there is no Bharat Mata. That is the imagination of those Bengali people, especially Abhindranath Tagore. Bharat Mata was portrayed as well as other goddesses from the Indian mythology, four-armed, wearing saffron colored robes, holding a book, shelves of rice, and a white cloth in her hands. The painting had helped in conceptualizing the ideas of Bharat Mata, the Mother India. Later there was something else, renovation in the art form, the colonial photography. There in your book, there are many examples of photography given. In the very chapter, You might be getting many photographs, the examples of colonial photography, the British king and queen during their visit to India in 1911. And there is one more photograph that is of Mahatma Gandhi when he held the Dandi March. The colonial photography, the British introduced photography in 1840s. They photographed archaeological sites. Due to this, the photography became a key element of archaeological survey of India. Why? Because those photographs could be served as evidences of particular style. They could be helpful for maintaining records. Exact record could be maintained by them. The revolt of 1857 created much public interest about India in Britain, creating an increased market for photographs about the culture and the lifestyle in India. How influential would that revolt of 1857 could be? You can be getting with that after that revolution or during that revolution, India became a destiny of keen interest among those Western people, European people, especially the English people. In England, photographs illustrating the revolt or the political events related with that revolt or those events what happened after that revolt of 1857. Thus, this was the key event in the development of photography in India. People who read stories about Delhi or Lucknow wanted to see what these places really looked like and wanted to see the pictures of India. As the photographs could be taken as well as the thing is looking like. When someone is making portrait of something, some changes could be brought in at the time of painting that, sketching that, but in the art of photography, this could not be possible. And people were really interested in those monuments, buildings. People who read stories about Delhi or Lucknow wanted to see what these places really looked like and wanted to see the pictures of India. And there could be only one medium what could be giving the real images of those places. That was the photography. Samuel Bond was a professional British photographer who set up the first photographic studio known as Bond and Shepherd in India. He traveled intensively through India and photographed the landscapes and the architecture of India. Felice Vito was able to capture images of the revolt. Colonial architecture, when the British people or the company got its political hold here in India, they gained the political control here in India. They started getting the buildings constructed. The colonialization of India also had been an impact on the architectural style. The imperial architecture was the architecture both of knowledge and the power that showed the architecture knowledge as well as the power of those British people. Madras, Bombay, and Calcutta were the British establishments, and the early stages of British architecture can be traced here. Why the early stage of the British architecture could be traced over there, because those were the territories what came under their control at first. They were the first provinces that came under their control. In its later phase, the colonial architecture culminated into what is called the Indo-Saracenic architecture. Means that was having blending of Indian architectural style and British architectural style. The Indo-Saracenic architecture combined the features of the Hindu, Islamic and the Western elements. All those three elements, what could be seen? Actually, Hindu and Islamic architectural styles combination could be seen in the buildings what were made in the Mughal era. And now what the British introduced, the Indo-Saracenic style, in that the Hindu, the Muslim and the Western style could be seen blended. The colonial architecture exhibits itself through the institutional, civic and utilitarian buildings such as the clock towers, post offices, railway stations and rest houses and the government buildings. In all of them we can see the Islamic, the Hindu and the Western art elements. Such buildings began to be built in large numbers over the whole empire. The Victoria Terminus, one of the finest railway stations in the world, was completed in 1888. It is an outstanding example of mixture of the two cultures, the Indian culture and the Western culture. The architecture of the Prince of Wales Museum is of Indo-Saracenic style. The Parliament House and the Connaught Place in Delhi are good examples of the colonial architecture. The architect Lutens designed Rashtrapati Bhavan, formerly the Viceroy's residence. It is built of sandstone and has design features like the canopies and jali from Rajasthan. The Victoria Memorial in Calcutta, former capital of British India, is a huge edifice in marble. It now houses a museum full of colonial artifacts. So children, we can see that how the art was influenced in the British era. When the printing presses were introduced by the British people or the colonial people, the flow of the images of Indian gods and goddesses from the Indian mythology came to be circulating among people. Later, when in 1840s the photography introduced in India, even the people who were from Britain or from England were very much interested in the events, in the political events about India under that 1857 revolt. They wanted to see what is India, what does it look like. So it was the time when the places like Agra, Delhi, Bombay, what the people were reading about them. I wanted to see how those places look like. Later, when the British people or the colonial people had control over the Indian territories, they started getting the buildings constructed. When the British construction took place, it was having all those styles what were prevailing in India blended with the Western style of architecture. Means they were having the Hindu, the Islamic and the Western elements in this art. The Victoria Terminus, what is one of the finest railway stations in the world, was completed in 1888, and it is an outstanding example of a mixture of the two cultures, the Indian and the Western. The architecture of the Prince of Wales Museum is of Indo-Saracenic style. The Parliament House, the Connaught Place are very good examples in Delhi what are showing the colonial architecture. Besides Viceroy's residence, what is now the Rashtrapati Bhavan, that is built of sandstones and design features are also there, like the jalis from Rajasthan, canopies and so on. The Victoria Memorial, what is nowadays a museum full of colonial artifacts, is also a very good example. That is a huge edifice in marble. And there is one case study is given in your book. In the beginning of the 20th century, a new movement in the art started in Europe, which came to be known as the Expressionism. This style of art principally developed in Germany and later spread to the United States. The style extended to a wide range of arts, including painting, literature, theatre, dance, film, architecture, and music. The term expressionism was invented by Czech historian Anton Matizek in 1910 as the opposite of Impressionism, an art movement of the 19th century. Expressionism is often suggestive of emotional agony. This style of art emphasized on expressing the artist's inner means mental or the spiritual experiences, rather than the objective reality. The famous Dutch post-impressionist, who was the impressionist painter Vincent van Gogh, greatly influenced expressionism. And children, now I think from my side the chapter is over here, and as usual, if you have any doubt, you are always welcome to get them clear either in your doubt class or in by calling anytime, and we shall soon see in the next lecture. By the time, I would like to wish you Good day.